So there's nothing more iconic than the Republic gunship, the LAAT-I, as an image of the Clone Wars and the Republic military during that conflict. It played a major role in nearly every battle. In fact, realistically, it was involved in every battle, and was an incredibly versatile gunship. So why didn't it have a proper successor? Well, today we're going to look at some vehicles that could be considered successors to the LAAT, and discuss why the Empire never really built an Imperial variant of it going forward. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So we all know the LAAT-I, the infantry variant of the LAAT that was a very common sight during the Clone Wars. It showed up on every battlefield and was very effective at not just carrying troops to and from battlegrounds, but in being a combat vehicle itself, carrying a variety of rockets and lasers and beam turrets to clear a battlefield of potential aggressors before landing troops. In fact, I would credit the LAAT's combat versatility for being one of the reasons why the Republic was so effective during the Clone Wars in battle, because this is a really well-designed gunship. So why did the Empire seemingly ditch it incredibly quickly? Well, for starters, there's the elephant in the room that the Empire really wanted to distance itself from the Republic, both visually, aesthetically, and sort of as a concept. So getting rid of things that served as sort of symbols of the Republic was first and foremost. So removing the LAAT does make sense from that perspective. And there are reasons why the LAAT was less suited for life under the Empire, and we'll talk about those a bit later. But ultimately, at its core, that's why it was removed, but what came to replace it? After all, you'd think, well, you might want to get rid of the LAAT because it's a symbol of the Republic. You want something to fill that role for the Imperial military, right? So let's just jump in with the primary Imperial troop transport that we see used during the reign of the Empire, the Sentinel-class landing craft. Now, I've actually talked about this quite a bit, and I actually really like the Sentinel class as a design, but as a successor to the LAAT, it leaves some stuff to be desired. The Sentinel basically ditches most of the LAAT's heavy armament, scaling the whole thing up and basing it off of the Lambda-class shuttle as a modified troop variant of the Lambda-class shuttle, capable of carrying a much larger troop complement of about 50 stormtroopers, but it lacked the ability to effectively clear a landing zone, having only a few forward-facing laser cannons. Now, this makes sense if your goal is to just dump a lot of troops onto the battlefield, but it greatly reduces trooper survivability right out of the door, as the landing zone just simply may not be cleared. Now, once again, that actually fits very well with Imperial military doctrine. They would send massive infantry waves and really wouldn't care what happened to them as long as the objective got secured. Maybe they would be willing to look past this glaring flaw to simply be able to deliver a ton of stormtroopers to the battlefield. But it's not the only successor. There was a few smaller vehicles that could be considered successors. The next one is one we saw during the Battle of Scarif, the TIE Reaper, which is capable of carrying a small infantry squad to and from the battlefield. And while I would argue that the TIE Reaper is probably the closest thing to a direct successor the Empire used on the battlefields of the Galactic Civil War, it still had a much smaller troop complement. It was more designed as a support fighter than as a troop transport. And furthermore, it wasn't really designed for a ton of air-to-ground combat. It didn't have the turrets and the versatility of the LAAT. The LAAT, for example, could swap out turrets for heavy searchlights to allow it to better see in low visibility environments, like on the battlefields of Umbara, where the Imperial TIE Reaper didn't seem to have any of those benefits. The next one worth talking about, though, is similar, but only appears once, and it's in The Mandalorian, although it's starting to be sort of shoehorned in here and there, and that's the Imperial Troop Transport. The Imperial Troop Transport is a small wedge-shaped vehicle that could be used to transport a similarly sized squad of troopers. It's more dedicated to transporting troops and less dedicated to ground combat. Once again, you have something that could carry a slightly smaller load of troops than the LAAT, but is dedicated as a light troop transport. But you totally ditch the gunship side of it, and I think that is a pretty big disadvantage. Now, there is another vehicle I want to throw out there that I don't think should have been placed in this role, but was a couple times, and that's the Lambda-class shuttle itself. Well, it's designed for VIP transport. We do see it used occasionally on the battlefield, It's not really designed for that. It's not a troop transport or a gunship, but could be considered some sort of a successor to the LAAT. Now, all of this is basically just on the battlefield, which is fair, but the Empire wasn't fighting a stand-up war against a regular aggressor. For most of their history, the Empire was simply a very large police force, and we see during the Clone Wars that the LAAT is a very effective policing tool. So why not keep it around for that? Well, they actually did. There is a special variant of the LAAT, which really doesn't feel like an LAAT. It's drastically different, but is named an LAAT-LE, the law enforcement variant of the LAAT we see used on Coruscant during the Clone Wars, that was used by the Empire fairly frequently in law enforcement and policing duties across the galaxy. In fact, it saw expanded use under the Empire for two reasons. Number one, the LAAT's advantages shined in a law enforcement environment, and it was not a visible symbol of the Republic like the combat version of the LAAT was. So the Empire ultimately ended up keeping that around for basically the entire duration of the reign of the Empire. And so if we needed to pick a vehicle that was the proper successor to the LAAT-I that we see used during the Clone Wars, I think the LAAT-LE is our best bet. But I think anything in this video could have been considered somewhat of a successor to the famed Republic gunship troop transport. At the end of the day, though, I think the one that was most commonly used by Imperial forces was the Sentinel-class landing craft, and if you'd like to learn more about that vehicle, I'll leave a link up here to a video I have breaking down the specifics on the Sentinel-class landing craft. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments which one of these vehicles you would consider to be the successor to the LAAT, or do you think there's a different vehicle that fits that role better? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars or anywhere else in science fiction, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.